The 1980s. After the massive snafu of the early 70s, Jimmy Carter tried to bring the country back to normal, but in 79, Iran became a massive thorn in the US's side. Iran had a theocratic revolution, which led to a massive oil shortage and a hostage crisis, so Carter had a lot on his plate to deal with for his re-election from his left and even to his right and center. March 21st, and the show Dallas had one of the largest seasonal cliffhangers of all time. The large question of who shot JR. A week later, Carter was campaigning for re-election, but during it, someone trying to live up to the hype of the cliffhanger shot Jimmy Carter. Gunman was apprehended, and Carter only suffered a wound to his shoulder, while his vice president, Walter Mondale, was fatally hit in the head. This led to San Francisco Mayor Dianne Feinstein being appointed the first female vice president in American history, due to her support of Carter in the earlier primary. April 26, Operation Eagle Claw rescued the hostages from Iran. The events of the helicopter sneaking into Iran to rescue hostages was turned into a video game, but it couldn't compete with Pac-Man. These two events boosted Carter's appeal, even with two lackluster performances in debates, which led to Jimmy Carter being re-elected. John B. Anderson won 3 states and was considered a massive spoiler for Reagan. But either way, the Republicans take over the Senate by 9, while 5 Republicans and 1 Democrat defect to John Anderson's new National Unity Party, who ultimately helped out the Carter administration get legislation passed. One that didn't happen was the Chrysler Corporation couldn't get an agreement to get bailed out by the government. December 9th, David Bowie was performing The Elephant Man when shots ran out and he was struck in the neck, tragically killing him. Another person who was in the audience, named John Lennon, was struck, but he survived. 1981, and the assassinations don't end because May 13th, Pope John Paul II was struck 4 times, killing him. But on a lighter note, July 9th, the arcade port of Popeye became one of the most recognizable arcade games of all time. And the Equal Rights Amendment banning discrimination based on sex becomes the 27th Amendment. It became illegal for someone to oust someone as being gay. August 3rd, and air traffic control went on strike, so Carter had to negotiate with them all the way into September. John Paul III was elected the new pope, a fiery anti-mafia Sicilian. Unlike the other 2 John Pauls, he was coronated with the papal tiara, being the currently last pope to do so, and currently the last Italian pope. Carter, with National Unity support, ended up passing a 50-cent per gallon oil tax and 5% foreign oil tax, with a compromised 20% decrease in Social Security to pay for expansion in jobs in green energy and nuclear energy to combat the early 80s recession, and also selling arms to the Mujahideen in Afghanistan to combat the Soviets without directly invading, kind of like the same they did in Grenada. The people in Lebanon wish they had it that easy. And by the end of the year, NASA discovered pictures of ice possibly being on the moon in the southern pole, near Shackleton Crater. And Carter nominated Stephen Breyer to the Supreme Court. 1982, the Carter administration deregulates TV, which leads to all the big 80s nostalgia franchises we all know and love, and large-scale funding to substance abuse centers. Martin Luther King Jr. Day becomes a national holiday as the NFL goes on strike, which next year leads to the founding of the USFL, or United States Football League. In 86, the NFL loses a trust bust case leading to both leagues coexisting. The USFL's legal case was led by New Jersey Generals owner Donald Trump. Sally Ride becomes the first woman to walk the moon, in a completely normal NASA mission, totally not to look for ice, and when it was discovered, NASA just announced it in 83. This caused the Soviets to withdraw from Afghanistan to use that money to go to the moon themselves, with Savannah Svikaya becoming the first Soviet woman to walk the moon. Carter promised a moon base by the end of the decade, and ironically, Ted Kennedy, the brother of John F. Kennedy and Carter's former rival in the 80 primary, jokingly referred to this as Star Wars politics. At the same time, the AIDS epidemic hit hard. The Carter administration funded treatment, and a lot of people, depending on which side you're on, either did too much or not enough to combat the issue. At the end of the year, John Lennon and Yoko Ono officially filed for divorce, while remaining close friends and work associates. Infamous 1984 was finally here, kicking off with some of the best comedies of all time.
The professionals. Ghost Stoppers! We're ready to believe you!
June 9th saw Eddie Murphy star as the young foal himself, Winston Zedmore, finding an ad and joining the Ghost Stoppers, learning to believe in ghosts as they uncovered a plot to a seemingly immoral architect known as Ivo Shandor, played by Paul Rubin, using occult mysticism to keep him alive so he can unleash his god by incarnating the gatekeeper and keymaster to unleash Gozer. And Winston accidentally thinks the form of the Destructor, the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man. The same year, Ernie Hudson stars in Beverly Hills Cop. It was pretty popular, but saw more success the next year due to its soundtrack and VHS sales. And Chrysler tried shifting to the new market of electric cars to combat the highest balls oil cost, which was the thing really hurting Jimmy's reputation, especially hurting Dianne Feinstein's attempt to run for president. And also a lot of people saying she's a lot more say than do, leading to her losing the primary to the young Gary Hart, a senator from Colorado.
The special interests are fighting Gary Hart because this is the prize. When they carve it up, when the PACs, the lobbyists, and the boys in the back room get what they want, what will be left for you? Who pays the bill for all of those political promises? You do. Gary Hart has had the courage to say no to the special interests. That's leadership. Gary Hart, a new leader for America.
Hart was 48 and very popular, even with conservatives, in the nickname the Atari Democrat and later the Nintendo Democrat, due to his dedication to technology and a free market.
I think we can meet the basic human needs and commitments of the people of this country by restoring entrepreneurship.
Reagan went a third time for the presidency, this time with Pat Buchanan, someone more similar to himself, hammering the Carter administration's liberalism and their weak foreign policies, like letting Nicaragua fall to communism, because the Carter administration did not want to fund the opposition who were dealing in cocaine. October 26 saw O.J. Simpson as the Terminator against Arnold Schwarzenegger as Kyle Reese, in one of the best genre-defining films of the century. The same month also saw Indira Gandhi survive an assassination attempt and remain Prime Minister of India till 1990, while British Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher didn't have it as easy with the Brighton hotel bombing. This led to the ascension of Michael Heseltine to Prime Minister, and Gary Hart winning the election very narrowly, becoming the 40th president and the first one born in Kansas just in time for the 50th anniversary of Wizard of Oz. Activist Jesse Jackson became the 44th vice president and the first African-American vice president in American history. Anderson only got one faithless elector in West Virginia, so he retired, dividing the organization Fairvote, while the NUP was basically done after the next Senate election, leaving them just a kind of interesting footnote in American history. November 20th saw the 50 billionth burger made by McDonald's, cooked by the then president of McDonald's, and eaten by the original founder of the company. Same day, the SETI was set up to search for intelligent life.
So you think we'll be ready by November?
3, 2, 1. And the Jamestown base was sent to the moon, with a crew following the next year in 85.
I've proposed a bill called the American Defense Education Act that would increase federal financial assistance to local school districts to increase teacher salaries and hire teachers. For this country to be number one in the 1980s and 90s, education must be the number one priority in this country.
As well as the founding of the Internet Engineering Task Force and the Chips and Science Act to fund science and microchip production domestically, and federally ban smoking on airplanes. After the Jamestown station totally wasn't accidentally sent up early, the crew made it, and were able to communicate with Mission Control via the AT&T picture phone. July 13th, the fundraiser known as Live Aid to fund AIDS research in Africa happened. After Kiss did a performance of Tears Are Falling, John Lennon did a cover of David Bowie's Heroes, as well as a cover of Paul McCartney's Let It Be, as Paul McCartney did a cover of John Lennon's song Imagine. In August, John Paul III declared a moral crusade against the mafia, excommunicating anyone that was associated, which led to a lot of violence and downright 50s levels of communist paranoia about who could be a mafia member. The Mondale Bill was passed that mandated background checks for any handgun purchases, and President Hart pushed for more nuclear power plants using thorium rather than uranium. The Soviet base landed near the Jamestown base. The Soviet base immediately was set up to be a mining outpost, discovering mass amounts of lithium. Within the next 3 years, this caused the Soviet economy to boom, as well as Gorbachev's mixed economy allowing for foreign investment. The Soviets ended up sailing from the electric car boom. Lawrence Taylor becomes the first major defectee from the NFL to the USFL, and John Lennon marries Grace Jones. 1986, the Food Quality Protection Act passed. January 28th, the Challenger ship that was supposed to take the people off of Jamestown and switch them out for new people, launch ended up being delayed because a NASA technician discovered the O-rings wouldn't withstand the cold temperature of the day. But in mid-February, a Soviet ship ended up exploding during its launch due to a similar problem the Challenger had, which led to the discovery of a man selling information to the Soviets from his ex-wife, and the founding of the Department of Homeland Security. The year also brought the banning of semi-automatic rifles, the AIDS Protection Act, and an expansion to the 27th Amendment to also end discrimination based on religion, disability, and race. Michael Jordan was drafted by the Trailblazers. Michael Heseltine called for snap elections, which he lost by 1 seat, to Labour Neil Kinnock. Him, Gary Hart, and Bob Hawke in Australia were seen as kind of three peas in a pod. The 3 Mile Island and Chernobyl nuclear power plants nearly melted down, almost, and Hart appointed the first 2 women to the Supreme Court, including the first Jewish person, Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Minimum wage went up to $4 an hour. The ban on women combat pilots was lifted. Sting, the lead singer of the band The Police, who had his first major movie role in Dune in 1984, had a breakout hit as the main villain, the Goblin King, in Jim Henson's Labyrinth, which ended up skyrocketing his career. The Beatles reunited for a tour to launch their new album, Everest. The fans loved it, unknowingly riding the wave of 60s nostalgia. The album itself telling the story about the Beatles breaking up, but then they started thinking, was this the right decision to do? They want to bring the band back together, but they're also fearful what the world will think about them now. But critics were missed, seeing the Everest album as a kind of best-of album, trying to cash in on nostalgia with songs like Yesterday, Come Together, and the Live Aid performances of Let It Be and Imagine. But 3 of the original songs by George Harrison were massive successes. When We Were a Fab, directly about George feeling sad that the Beatles broke up. Got My Mind Set on You became the biggest hit of the year. And This Is Love became a very common commercial song for how catchy it is. Way of the World by Ringo Starr also exist. California and Massachusetts became the first states in America to legalize gay marriage. 1987, and we sent a rover to Mars. President Hart met with Gorbachev, signing a treaty similar to the Arctic Treaty that made the moon neutral territory, but also allowed for mining. And Hart returned to America to discover the press discovered his affair with White House aide Diana Rice. Hart apologized to his wife, family, and nation and promised not to run for re-election. Despite the polls showing a favorable outcome, and the average American really didn't care or just thought it was funny because he was doing so well as president, didn't care about his personal life, Republicans hammered him on this.
To strengthen the American family, to make American families a lot more like the Waltons and a lot less like the Simpsons.
The year also saw the launch of the Sea Dragon ship to fire reusable rockets in the ocean. 1988. Hart had a 3rd Supreme Court nominee, as the economy was doing superb, even in Russia. But biased news networks fudged the truth to get ratings. Vice President Jesse Jackson was the frontrunner, but a lot of news sources started criticizing him by being too liberal for America, comparing him to possibly losing as bad as George McGovern, which led to Jackson losing the primary to businessman Donald Trump, who selected Senator from Delaware Joe Biden as his running mate. Trump was an outsider businessman who just wanted to keep the economy good. The voters thought he was a little too different from Hart and Carter, and a lot of people thought he didn't really stand for much other than trying to get power, which a lot of people also didn't even take him serious when he announced it because it was right after the Mike Tyson match. So a lot of people thought he was just doing it for attention. Republicans thought the world was changing a little too quickly and thought, let's try to be more wholesome and family friendly by pulling literally the poster child for it.
That's your face, and watching you watch yourself as a little girl on...
Former child star, ambassador to Ghana, Shirley Temple Black.
Is it like watching some other little girl? Or...
It's like a scrapbook coming to life. That's what it is.
Temple, who was Reagan's running mate in '76, was seen as a gentle, soft-spoken reflection of a more humble past, while Trump was seen as the poster child to the yuppie movement, and Temple was seen as honestly more similar to Carter than him.
Were you really that cheerful, or were you just acting?
I'm a happy person. I'm optimistic, but I'm a realist.
She selected the former CIA director and representative from Texas, George H.W. Bush. Megachurch pastor Pat Robinson refused to accept a woman's nominee, so he ran as an independent with Pat Buchanan, which led to the election of the first Republican since 1976. Shirley Temple became the 41st and first woman president. Pat Robertson had a respectable showing, but conceded the election, unlike Trump. Jesse Jackson got a faithless elector in Hawaii and Georgia. And 30 years later, it was proven that the whole Hart scandal and the nomination of Donald Trump really was a McGovern situation because the Republicans manipulated the system to have the most easy win. Trump had to sell the New Jersey Generals to Jimmy the Greek even after his racial comments last year to pay for the campaign, and next year he'll also be the face of the anti-Central Park 5, which will eventually get him kicked out of the Democratic Party. 1989, and the first thing the Temple government did was remove the gas tax. Might be a coincidence, but also had one of the largest oil spills off the coast of Alaska. The Soviets loosened their grip on Eastern Europe, which led to Solidarity winning the Polish elections, which slowly crumbled the Eastern Bloc. Many in the international community did not want East and West Germany to unite, fearing competition, but they did anyway, as well as the establishment of the Republic of Prussia from the old Kaliningrad Oblast. But despite calling themselves Prussian and identifying such, they kind of had a massive identity crisis, which still continues today, due to the majority of Germans were exiled after World War II and Russians were forcibly moved in, and they kind of identify with the Baltic, and they're kind of just don't know what they are anymore. Meanwhile, in China, this led to massive revolt right next to the KFC, which led to the transition of the end of the People's Republic. June saw the rise of comic book movies with Michael Keaton's Batman and Robin Williams as the Joker. The Supreme Court ruled that teenagers cannot be given the death penalty, and Secretary of Education Dan Quayle made his first of many logical flubs. The Moscow Music Peace Festival and David Hasselhoff's concert in Berlin is seen as the triumphant end of the Cold War. The '89 game between the NFL's 49ers and USFL Michigan Panthers became the first major league crossover between the football leagues. Helium-3 is found on the moon in large doses. The next day, Operation Just Cause launches in Panama to regime change as Romania collapses into civil war. 1990. Japan elects its first woman and first different political party since 1948, Takako Doi. The Godfather 3, The Last Crusade, is a film about the assassination of the first two John Pauls to try and get a mafia pope, which ended up backfiring on them. NASA successfully launches the nuclear energy for rocket vehicle application, and the Hubbard telescope, which ended up being a little blurry at first. Everyone had full moon fever as the Jamestown base expanded to 50 people. 1991, and China agrees to a new constitution and elects the Liberal Party's Bao Tong. O.J. Simpson declined to return for Terminator 2, which led to his role being recast to Sylvester Stallone.
He's fantastic. This is his best performance ever.
Temple appoints 2 nominees, but during the screening of Clarence Thomas, he had very inappropriate lewd contact, which led to him being replaced by the 3rd woman on the Supreme Court. Gene Roddenberry's ashes are shot to the moon, along with Isaac Asimov's next year. 1992, and Taiwan reunites with the mainland after 40 years and some change. Sam Kinison survives a car accident. Crystal Pepsi becomes the first soda and first commercial product to film in space. George Jr., the son of the vice president, becomes a commissioner for baseball as Japan launches their moon base. Mark Mori becomes the first Japanese person to moonwalk. While in Jamestown, Jeanette Davis and Mark Lee have the first wedding in space. Temple easily wins re-election against Paul Tsongas, and his vice president nominee Bill Clinton was arrested right before the election due to admitting to smoking weed. Many also blame the independent Ross Perot in the founding of the Reform Party. And so NAFTA was founded, and to celebrate 7-Up delivered a Shirley Temple-themed 7-Up based on the non-alcoholic cocktail. 93 was a crazy year. A disgruntled American worker made at Jamestown with a concealed gun. Unknowing to the Americans, he marched to a Soviet base and held it hostage, until American miners saw him. One of the miner's suits were damaged and he died, while the other one was able to contact Earth, which led to a UN peacekeeper force having to be sent to the moon. Armed with guns and scissors, they were able to sneak into the base. With just the miner and one of the hostages killed, when the man forced them into space without a suit. Many saw this response as very quick and efficient, while others were lamenting that this was an end to the neutrality of the moon. Nintendo partnered with Philips to produce the Super Nintendo Entertainment System Compact Disc Interactive, or the SNES CDI, which allowed you to play CD games on your Super Nintendo, which became infamous for being just awful, and discontinued in 96. Brian Mulroney in Canada won re-election with a minority government and, fearing a no-confidence vote, resigned, which led to Kim Campbell becoming the first woman prime minister in Canadian history. Brandon Lee became a huge star thanks to The Crow, and Hawaii became the 3rd state to legalize gay marriage. 1994 saw the creation of the Space Force, pushing for a security force on the moon. The UK landed Elizabethville as the next moon colony, and India landed another base but away from everyone else's. Kurt Cobain went back into rehab. Michael Jordan makes it to the major leagues of baseball. Iowa becomes the 4th state to legalize gay marriage, as oil companies start getting that helium-3 off the moon in large amounts, which led to many in the gas, oil, and coal sectors losing their jobs. A common form of protest was taking a 7-Up Shirley Temple and dumping it in the electric car charging port, known as the Static Shirley. 95, the Beatles released what they wouldn't have known would be their last album, Brainwashed. Japan was set to start the first biofarms on the moon, but was delayed due to cult activities. Peace negotiations led to the end of the Yugoslav and Romanian War, which was known as the Third Balkan War, which formally dissolved Yugoslavia. Romania was part of the Western powers now, as well as uniting with Moldova, except for the breakaway Transnistria. All good. The International Space Station launched to be humanity's last best hope for peace, and the pink M&M wins the contest to become a new main M&M. 96, Peter Steele becomes the new lead singer of the Misfits. Nirvana releases their next album, Foo Fighter. 5 out of 10 Americans now drive electric or hybrid cars. And George H.W. Bush loses the election to the former Secretary of State under Gary Hart, Al Gore, becoming the 42nd president, first baby boomer, and the first president born in Washington, D.C. The governor of Indiana, Evan Bayh, becomes the 46th vice president. 97. The Ellen Show is renewed for a 6th and final season. Pope John Paul III retires. Gore gets back to the Hart Initiative of going into green energy, technology, and computers. Sonny Bono becomes the commander of Jamestown. The original one, John Glenn, remains the oldest man in space at 95. and partnering with Hilton leads to the moon bases, including hotels for the families of the workers. The sun finally sets on the British Empire as Hong Kong's return to China. The moon base is made into a general EU base. Well, at least they finally have another British Pope. 1998, and the Soviets win the race to the cradle, with the Circassian Altair Kabar being the first human being born outside of Earth. Along with Operation Infinite Reach accidentally hitting a hospital, the US wasn't looking too good, so Al Gore became the first president to visit Jamestown. In a legendary speech, the man who's often joked as being boring in the media said, "Pack your bags because in the millennium, we're getting our asses to Mars." 1998, and Brandon Lee beats out Sting and Will Smith to get the lead role of Neo in The Matrix. Gorbachev is hospitalized after an assassination attempt while visiting the Uzbekistan SSR, eventually resigning to Alexander Yakovlev. In America, after one of the most notorious incidents of public shooting, Gore, inspired by Australia, launches a major buyback program for guns to destroy them. Many rural people hated this and thought the government was coming for their guns, even though the government was paying you for your gun and wasn't trying to steal it. Dan Quayle returned to politics to try and campaign on this, becoming the frontrunner for the 2000s election, along with babyface Gary Barr, and the Reform Party was even looking strong without Perot, leading to a three-way election coming up. After Chris Farley's tragic death in '97, Sam Kinison became the new voice of Shrek. The studio had no faith in this, which is ironic because the film went on to become the highest grossing of the year and became one of the biggest parts of pop culture. Harvey Weinstein is found guilty of sexual assault. The trial in the 2000s led to the uncovering of one of the largest trafficking rings ever. A referendum to change Australia into a republic passes, which leads to John Howard, a monarchist, resigning as Prime Minister, while Malcolm Turnbull taking office as the first President of Australia the next year. Benedict XVI becomes Pope. Hulk starring Jonathan Hensleigh, Lynn Williams as the Abomination, Gregory Sporlander as the leader, and Sam Elliott as Thunderbolt Ross premieres, combining CGI and ridiculously large animatronics. The Church of Scientology starts getting interested in going to Mars themselves, along with India. Richard Branson invests in the European space program and wants to go to Mars as well as stating he wants a civilian hotel in space by 2004. Nigeria also wants to go to Mars, funded by the African Union and an investor called Elon Musk from South Africa. North Korea as well wants a manned mission, which they were going to do to Moon, but they're gonna send one to Mars, making sure to pack them a lot of potatoes. The North Korean mission launches way before everyone else is, and no one really cares because everyone's too focused on Y2K. Our lazy dumbasses only wrote the last two digits and didn't change it. It's gonna be 00. All the computers are gonna fail. The dictator of Paraguay launches martial law on New Year's.
6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Happy 2000!
Let me know what you thought down below, as well as hitting the like button and the subscribe button and hype on mobile.